What's up, everyone? It's the Football Therapist here to talk about start and sits for Week 5. So here is some transparency on our Week 4 starts and sits. We designated 30 quarterbacks as either start or sit. We hit on 19 for 63%. We designated 64 running backs, hit on 39 for 61%. Designated 76 wide receivers as either a start or sit, hit on 50 for 66%. And we hit on 37 tight ends we designated. We hit on 25 for 68%. Overall, a solid week. We can definitely improve in some numbers, especially running backs. We had a 70% hit rate on week 3, went down a little bit there. And we kind of missed on some guys. Let's talk about the big hits. McKinnon, we were high on him, had a great game. Melvin Gordon, Will Fuller, Jarvis Landry. Ryan Fitzpatrick was our streamer of the week. He put up very good numbers as a streamer. We said Baker Mayfield to sit. T.Y. Hilton as a sit. As for our misses, Zach Ertz did not do much this week. Kenyon Drake disappointed again. David Montgomery did not get the volume we were expecting. We said CeeDee Lamb was a sit because we thought Michael Gallup would be the guy again this week. Well, it was CeeDee Lamb. Carson Wentz we had as a sit, but his rushing ability really helped him out, and he had a solid week. And Antonio Gibson, we weren't too high on him, but he had a very solid week, better than we expected. So here are some quarterbacks we are comfortable starting this week. Jared Goff. Washington is giving up 22 points per game to quarterbacks. Goff has put up 24 plus points in his 2 road games, and he should be able to exploit this secondary with mismatches at the tight end position. I'm very confident in Goff this week. Ryan Tannehill is another name. They're coming off a bye, obviously. I expect them to have a big day coming off this bye. Bills let up 21 points per game to quarterbacks. A.J. Brown should be back, so I'm going to start Tannehill this week. Carson Wentz is another start. Pittsburgh gives up around 18 points per game, which is kind of that threshold we'd like to see for a quality start. Wentz last week, we saw him have a rushing touchdown. I expect him to run a little bit more as these weeks go on until his guys can get healthy. I think that rushing upside gives him a little bit safer of a floor. I'm not expecting huge numbers, but I think that he could get around 20 points per game, and he is a start again this week. Joe Burrow, he throws the ball a ton. We've seen that. He's throwing it a lot. He's third most in red zone attempts, which is a lot for the red zone area. He's 6th in completed air yards with 674, so he's throwing the ball down the field a ton. His floor seems to be around 15 points. I could see him having to throw the ball around 40 times this game and potentially get 2 touchdowns. Also, Baltimore is giving up 21.4 points per game to quarterbacks, so I will start him today. Ryan Fitzpatrick is another start. 20 fantasy points in the past 3 games. The Dolphins throw a ton. He's 7th in completed air yards with 669. So again, he's throwing the ball down the field. San Francisco does give up about 18.2 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, but the pass-heavy attack, I expect Fitzpatrick to do well. Lastly, I'm really looking to stream Teddy Bridgewater this week. Atlanta's secondary stinks. They give up about 25.6 points per game to quarterbacks. Bridgewater, last week, he was QB4. He put up 26 points. I expect a ton of points in scoring in this one, so start Bridgewater. Here are some quarterbacks to sit in Week 5. Tom Brady could be without Chris Godwin and Evans. Chicago, they're only giving up 12.4 points to quarterbacks. It's a Thursday night game. It could be sloppy, low scoring. I'm going to sit them this week. Kansas City, they're only giving up about 14.8 points per game to quarterbacks. Carr, he has a ceiling right now at about 20 points per game at any given game. I expect this, though, to be very difficult for Las Vegas. They've been kind of struggling on and off, so I'm particularly not going to start Carr this week. Joe Flacco in Superflex leagues, just don't start him. This Jets offense is terrible. Dwayne Haskins, he kind of has a ceiling at around that 18-point threshold, and the Rams are giving up about 18.8 points per game. It's a very tough defensive front. With that limited upside and the little weapons he has, I'm not going to start Dwayne Haskins this week. I'm going to sit him, and I have to see a higher ceiling from this guy in order to be confident. Phillip Rivers, he has less fantasy points than Sam Darnold right now. He's 23rd in air yards and 23rd in completed air yards. He doesn't push the field down, the ball down the field enough to really trust him, and I don't really trust him even against an easier matchup, so sit him this week. Lastly, Indianapolis, they give up the least amount of points to quarterbacks. Baker, to me, he's going to struggle a little bit more this week. They'll lean on that run game again, and I don't expect much out of Baker this week, so he's going to be one of my bigger sits this week. Here are some running backs to start in week 5. Devin Singletary, he's been top 12 overall in the past 2 weeks. The Titans give up almost 24 points per game. He's 6th in receptions with 16, and that's key for PPR leagues, so I think he has a relatively safe floor this week. Start him in your lineups. Antonio Gibson, he saw 17 touches last week. He's being used both as a rusher and a receiver. He had 5 targets last week. He's averaging about 5.3 yards per touch, so I'm expecting a quality game from him even against a tougher opponent. Jacksonville, well, they just kind of got destroyed by Joe Mixon. They give up 24 points per game. This is the game that you want to start David Johnson with a ton of confidence. He saw 18 touches last week, a season high. And I think that with a new coach, they could lean on the run a little bit more this week, so start him in your lineups. Devontae Freeman, he saw 15 touches last week, and he had 4 catches. That's a pretty good number for his second week on the team. The Cowboys defense just gave up 300 yards to the Browns. I think that in a high-scoring game where the Dallas Cowboys are going to put up a ton of points, I think that he could get a lot of touches and a lot of quality looks. Dallas is also giving up 21 points per game to running backs, so as a flex, especially in deeper leagues, I don't hate it this week. Mike Davis, he's had 6+ targets each week, 20+ touches. I expect a lot of scoring and another big fantasy week for him, so start him. Now, McKinnon is a must-start this week for me, even with or without Mostert. I think if Mostert plays, he'll be eased back in. McKinnon saw 8 targets last week. I think he'll be used a ton in the passing game, especially with Coleman on IR and Mostert just starting to get healthy. I expect another huge 20+ fantasy point week for Jerick McKinnon. Here are some running backs to sit in week 5. Myles Gaskin against San Francisco. San Francisco is the best defense against the run. They only give up about 10.8 points per game, and Gaskin only saw 13 touches this week. I don't really trust this matchup. I expect him to have to throw a ton this week. David Montgomery, he wasn't really involved this week. I didn't really understand why they didn't give him more touches or more looks. Tampa Bay, they're only giving up 16 points per game to running backs. I expect with the short week that both defenses will be very good in this game, so I will sit him. That's why I'm sitting Ronald Jones as well. He had plenty of touches last week. Fournette was out, obviously. If Fournette plays, that'll eat into his workload. He also had several key drops in the game, and that worries me as he could potentially be benched if he keeps dropping passes. It's an average matchup, but if any of Fournette or Vaughn eat into this workload, Rojo can disappear really quickly. Now, as for the Ravens and the Rams, I've been going back and forth every week with these guys, and I've been getting it wrong. For the Ravens, I've kind of been sitting them every single week. I had one start for Mark Ingram, and he disappointed. No Ravens running back is averaging more than 10 touches a game, and no one is averaging more than 8 points per game in fantasy. There's not enough volume. Sit these guys until further notice. Same with the Rams. I just don't understand how Darrell Henderson goes from getting 21 touches to getting less than 10. They go back and forth. They'll use the hot hand. This backfield will be annoying, so just sit them for now and see what happens. Lastly, I'm sitting Melvin Gordon this week. The Pats defense are starting to really get hot. They were with that Kansas City Chiefs team for most of that game. They've been holding running backs in check, giving up only 12.9 points per game to running backs. Philip Lindsay could be back, And right now, Melvin Gordon is only averaging 4 yards per carry, which is 37th in the league. So I'd personally look for other options this week. Here are some wide receivers to start. I like Jefferson this week. There's no Jamal Adams. The Seahawks give up 41.6 points per game to wide receivers. The Vikings are going to have to score a ton. I see him putting up quality numbers. Dallas, they're giving up 36 points per game to wide receivers. Golden Tate is going to be a play for me for that reason. He saw 6 targets last week. I expect the Giants to pass a ton this week, and he could see plenty of volume and have a quality game. Cincinnati, they're giving up 22 points per game to wide receivers, and Marquise Brown just saw 8 targets last week, a season high. I think we'll see a big play from him this week, and he'll be a little bit more efficient in a quality showing. Deontay Johnson is also another big play for me. Philly, they've given up 23.4 points per game to wide receivers. Darius Slay, in my opinion, he's going to cover Juju, and he's a very good cornerback. I think that he could give Juju some fits, so I think that's going to open up some looks for Deontay Johnson. And in weeks 1 and 2, let's not forget, he saw 10-plus targets, so he's a big play this week for me. Brandon Ayuk is also a play. He saw 5 targets last week, but Miami is giving up 27.2 points per game, so I see him getting a little bit more volume. Also, Deebo Samuel, he had 25 snaps. He's just being eased in. He can't be a star for me this week with the limited snaps we've seen, so I'm going to start Brandon Ayuk. And lastly, DJ Moore is definitely a big play. I would fire him up. Atlanta, we know they're a weak secondary, and he has one of the stats that I really like, he's 6th in completed air yards. So he's getting a lot of air yards. He's getting a lot of balls downfield. He's 12th in targets for the year. So I'm going to expect a big game for him this week. Here are some wide receiver sits. Scotty Miller is a sit for me. He had a very good week last week, but Chicago is giving up only 16.9 points per game to wide receivers. He's a bit banged up as well, so I expect him to be a little sluggish this game, so I'm going to sit him this week. Higgins is another sit. He's doing really well these past few weeks, but Baltimore is a very tough defense. Yes, they've given up 21 points per game to wide receivers, but I expect that they'll play very good this game, and I expect that those numbers are a little inflated from the Chiefs game, so I'd sit them this week for other options. Russell Gage is also very interesting. The Falcons, they have injuries to Julio. He's going to be out for a while. And Ridley has been banged up. He had no points last week, no catches. So I don't really know what's going on in Atlanta right now. So if Julio and Ridley are both out, definitely play Gage. But if Ridley is still in, I would be cautious. Last week, Gage only saw 4 targets. Zacchaeus, he's coming on strong. He had 9 targets last week, so I worry about Gage's volume right now. Again, monitor injury reports, but right now he's a sit. Woods, he's also been up and down this season. Washington only allowed 16.8 points per game to wide receivers, and that's second best in the NFL right now. Kendall Fuller is a great corner, so I would sit him for better options if I could. Deebo, like I said before, he only had 25 snaps, so although it may be an appealing start, until he gets higher snap usage, I'm going to sit him for right now. And Michael Gallup, he had that one big game, but the other games, he's only seen 5 targets every game. So in 3 games, he's seen 5 targets, so I would sit him for other Dallas players. I just don't trust his usage right now. Here are some tight ends to start. Dallas, they're giving up 11.9 points per game to tight ends. We know this defense is rough. Ingram, he saw 10 targets last week, so I'm going to be starting him this week, and he should get plenty of good looks. On the other side, I'm also starting Schultz. He's currently tight end 6 and could be a weekly start. They pass a ton. There's plenty of weapons, so I think that with all these weapons, he should get plenty of good looks. Ian Thomas, to me, he's a start. Atlanta has given up 11.5 points per game to tight ends. Thomas saw a touchdown this past week. I expect him to get another one. He could put up low-end tight end 1 numbers. Also, Hayden Hurst could be a start. Like I said with the wide receivers, Julio probably won't play. Calvin Ridley is banged up. I think we'll see an increase in volume for Hurst, so I'm starting him this week. And Mo Ali Cox is a big start for me this week. He's been seeing the receptions, the touchdowns. Cleveland is not good against tight ends. He actually leads the team in receptions outside of running backs. He's tied first with 10 receptions, which isn't a lot, but for a tight end, I definitely would start him this week. Some tight ends to sit this week. Darren Arnold, the matchup is appealing going against the Jets, but he's only seeing an average of 3 targets per game. I personally wouldn't start him. Same with Tyler Kroft. He only saw 3 targets last week. Yes, the Titans are letting up 11.4 points per game to tight ends, but the volume just isn't there. I'd sit him. Austin Hooper also a sit for me. Indy is only letting up 1.8 points per game to opposing tight ends. This is a bad matchup. I'd sit him. Greg Olsen, as bad as Minnesota is, they're giving up only 6.7 points per game to opposing tight ends. I don't really trust his usage. I think they'll be utilizing the wide receivers a lot this week, so I will sit him. And Mike Gesicki, I don't know what happened to this guy. He had that big week 2. Since then, he's only gotten 3 targets in each of the following weeks. San Francisco is only giving up 3.9 points per game to tight ends. His volume just has not been there, so I'm sitting him this week. Here are some of my favorite defenses this week. Arizona going against Joe Flacco in this Jets offense. I'd start him and definitely pick him up if they're on waivers. The Rams versus Washington. Kyle Allen is the starter. I actually made the QB portion of this Tuesday night before it was announced, so I would definitely start the Rams. And Kansas City, they're getting their cornerback Breeland back. They've looked good these past couple of weeks. I would start them against Las Vegas. It's very difficult this week as some of the games are up in the air. I will definitely try to keep you guys updated. Follow us at the Football Therapist, and also subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys next time.